In this video, I'm going to be giving an unbiased review of the Ryobi Cordless Hot Glue Gun. I'm also going to be giving you a bit of an overview of what I use hot glue for and why this may well be a tool that you're missing in your workshop. So I first bought a hot glue gun about 2.5 years ago, and I bought it for a very specific purpose. Back then I didn't have a planer thicknesser, I just had a standalone thicknessing machine. And a lot of the wood that I was working with was quite wonky. So I used the tried and tested way of flattening a board with a thicknesser, which is to use a sled, a piece of MDF or plywood, something essentially is just nice and flat that you then attach your board to and run it through the thicknesser to get a nice flat face. And hot glue is perfect for adhering your workpiece onto a sled like that. So the first one I bought was a little craft job. It was about this big, took tiny little glue sticks, had a really short cable. It did what I needed it to do, but it was a nightmare to use, and that's not me knocking that tool. Ultimately, I bought something which was meant for small craft work and tried to use it in a workshop. So it was me being an idiot. I use hot glue for lots of different jigs around the workshop. For example, gluing something in place as a drill guide. I quite often attach sacrificial fences and negative stops onto the table saw table. The hot glue sticks to the cast iron just fine and it comes off even better, so it doesn't leave any nasty marks behind. If I'm fixing something to a ceiling or something high up, I'll quite often use a little bit of hot glue, stick it in place. There's plenty of sticking power there, it's not going to go anywhere. I can then come back with a drill and a driver and put some more permanent fixings in place. So to begin with, I want to go through the things that I like about the tool. Now, I've got a few Ryobi tools, and the general consensus, not just from me, but from a lot of people, is that ergonomics are not Ryobi's strong point. And I have a few tools which they're just plain uncomfortable to use. Thankfully, this one is quite comfortable. I'd say I've got fairly average size hands and I find it really comfortable to grip. The trigger is a decent size, so it sounds silly, but it's easy to use. It's not a little tiny trigger that you've got to hunt around for with your fingers when you're not looking at the tool itself. I find it just sits in my hand really nicely. The trigger has also got a decent range of movement on it, so if you're drawing a bead of hot glue, you don't have to sit there hammering the trigger to get enough glue out to create your bead. You can put even pressure on the trigger and you get quite a lot of glue for each trigger squeeze, which is nice because if you're concentrating on going in a straight line, for example, you don't want all that extra motion of pressing the trigger. There's also a power on and off switch which is within easy reach of your thumb, and I find this really useful as a lot of the time I'll glue something with the gun and then it's generally going to be 5 or 10 minutes before I need to glue the next piece. So I don't want it sitting here draining battery and potentially oozing out glue because the hot end's still running and you've still got a glue stick in there. So when I've finished doing some gluing, if I still need to use the tool a little bit later on, I just flick the switch off. It retains heat fairly well, so if it's only 5 minutes or so between uses, switching it back on, you're only going to be waiting a short period of time before it's back up to speed and you can carry on gluing again. Something else which I like about the tool is, as you've probably guessed, the construction is primarily plastic, but even when this has been running for a reasonable length of time, I say 20-30 minutes for example, the top here doesn't get dangerously hot. I wouldn't advise picking it up by this part of the tool when it's been running for a long period of time, but it doesn't get hot to the point where you're going to injure yourself if you touch there. There's also a silicone nozzle which covers the majority of the hot end, again reducing the possibility that you accidentally knock your hand into it and give yourself a nasty burn. This is a cordless tool, so you can put it down pretty much wherever you want, so you need to be aware that there's a very hot piece of metal floating around in your workshop and to watch where you put in your hands. So really the only bit you'd need to seriously be wary of is the little brass hot end here that is exposed. leaving one of the, if not the biggest convenience till last, is that it's cordless and it stands up. One of the things I hated about my other glue gun was it was really small. It had a cable and a little wire stand on the front of it, so it would kind of sit like this, but it was just always falling over. If you caught the wire on something, if you opened the shed door and a breeze came through, it would fall over. But with this one, especially because the battery attaches at the bottom, it's very bottom heavy, so you can still knock it over, but it's gonna withstand the odd knock here and there, and you're going to be pretty rest assured that when you put it down, it's going to be where you've left it and you come back to it, and it's not going to be tipped over and sitting in a pile of glue, which is a huge positive. From a completely cold start, the glue gun takes about 2.5 minutes to get to the point where you can pull the trigger and some glue will be ejected out of the nozzle, but it takes about 4 minutes to get to a more optimum temperature. If you use the glue when it's barely above melting point, then you won't get very long working time because the glue is going to set a lot faster. So it's better to let the glue gun heat up a bit longer so that when you're using the glue, you get a little bit more time to position your pieces before the glue sets. So now we're going to look at how much leakage we get from the glue gun. I'm going to do 3 trigger pulls so there's a decent amount of glue going through the gun, and then I'll leave it sat there and we'll see how much leaks out after I've finished. So as you can see, we have got a bit of leakage going on with the glue gun at the minute. It's not pouring out, but there is a reasonably consistent stream of glue coming out there. So what I tend to do, if I want to stop it dripping, if it's got to this point, is after I've finished pushing some glue through the tool, I just flick it off for a moment and take the pressure off of the glue stick. And you'll still get a little tiny bit of drip out there, but it should stop fairly quickly. See, this is just solidified now. And if I need to go on and glue something else up, I can just flick it back on because this stays pretty hot for quite a while, so it will come back up to the right temperature very quickly to enable you to carry on gluing. But that's just a quick way of stopping it dripping and losing a whole glue stick without even realizing it. So I've been through the positives of the tool. There are a couple of negatives. The first being the glue dripping. So from what we saw in the drip test a little bit earlier in the video, it does drip, and it's something I've kind of learned to live with. I use it fairly often, so it's kind of habitual now that I'm aware that it might drip. So I always make sure to, if I'm not going to be using it for a few minutes, I flick the power off, pull the glue stick back a little bit and make sure it's sat over something sacrificial, and it doesn't cause me any problems, to be honest. I don't end up losing, wasting a lot of glue. I can imagine that if you used it very infrequently, it would probably be more of a problem because you most likely forget about it each time, and you may end up wasting some glue or ending up with a pool of hot glue somewhere that you don't want it. But for me personally, I've learned to live with it and it doesn't bother me too much. The other downside is I kind of wish it would heat up a bit faster, but again, this is probably me having too higher expectations for a tool of this price point and of its type. I mean, ultimately it's running off of a 18-volt battery, so it hasn't got a huge amount of power to draw on, and there's always going to be that kind of compromise between battery life and how much juice it wants to flow through it. I still think the heat up times are reasonably good. Generally, if I'm getting ready to use this, I'll set it going and go off and make a cup of tea, and by the time I come back, we're ready to go. So they're the two downsides, and quite frankly, I think the positives far outweigh those two. So all in all, I heartily recommend this, and I wouldn't be without it if I'm honest. Nothing's perfect, and the benefit that I get from having this far outweighs a few little problems which I've learned to deal with. So in terms of price on this tool, when I bought it about 18 months ago, I paid £35, I've looked on Amazon today and they're sitting at around 40 now, so they've gone up a bit but not dramatically. If you're in a similar position to myself and you already have some Ryobi tools, then you'll only need to buy the body. So 40 quid plus some glue sticks and you're good to go. If you're interested in buying this glue gun and you don't have any Ryobi kit, then you will need to buy at least one battery and a charger to go with it. I don't think Ryobi do a starter kit with the glue gun. They often do starter kits with a drill, impact driver, etc. but I don't think they do with a glue gun, so you'd need to buy the battery and the charger, which run at about 30 to 40 pounds each. So if you're going into this completely from scratch with no Ryobi gear, it was probably going to cost you around 100 to 120 pounds for the glue gun, the battery, charger and some glue sticks to get you started. So that pretty much wraps things up for this video. All in all, the Ryobi hot glue gun gets a big thumbs up from me. I wouldn't be without it. It's a really good tool and an integral part of my workshop. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you found it useful, then please hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be releasing lots more videos covering various projects, jigs and the odd tool review here and there over the coming weeks and months, and it would be fantastic to have you guys along for that. Either way, thanks again for watching and I'll see you in the next video.